Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our March 7th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today's episode features Cedar County row crop farmer Noah Coppess, who joins us to share the landowner relationship tips that he offered his peers at Iowa Farm Bureau's recent Young Farmer Conference in Des Moines. We'll also have Brian Waddingham of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, who's going to give livestock farmers some tangible reasons to plant trees on their farms. Brian will also tell us what trends he's seeing right now when it comes to livestock production and expansion in Iowa. But we'll start with Noah Coppess, who is invited to share his unique first-hand insights for building strong relationships with landowners at our Young Farmer Conference in late January. And that's where Farm Bureau's Caitlin Lamb met up with Noah Coppess.
Hey Noah, thanks for taking the time to sit with me. Can you tell me about your family farm?
Sure. So on our farm, we raise corn and soybeans. My wife and I work together on it. She works in town full-time at Mercy Medical Center. My son Tucker's 12 and likes to help on the farm and play video games and things like that. My daughter Ellie, she's 10. She likes to shop. She likes to make science experiments in the kitchen. And she likes to help out on the farm too some. So that's where we're at right now in our journey. We raise corn and soybeans. We cash rent. We own a small portion with some family members, and we deal with multiple landowners, investors, neighbors, the gamut.
Yeah, and you're here speaking at this year's Young Farmer Conference about landlord relationships. And you kind of have this interesting story about, family and owning land. And you kind of had to run it by 27 different people to get where you are.
Yeah, so my dad's one of 7, and then there's something like 20 grandkids. And so there was a trust developed that my grandparents put together because family continuity or everybody getting along was a big deal to my grandparents. And it's a big deal to our family as a whole. So there was no secrets, no surprises when Grandma and Grandpa passed away. And, we had communicated. We'd been farming the farm for a few years prior to my grandfather passing. And we'd been in very open communication about our goals to have some ownership on the farm. And so when that time came, initially my dad and his siblings had the opportunity first to buy the farm, and a few of them decided to do that, and my dad chose to take a different route, which met his needs, and that was fine. He had communicated that long in advance, and so that wasn't a surprise. And my wife and I were prepared to make a purchase. And we communicated that then to the folks that were buying or chose to buy, and they thought about that, talked about it amongst themselves, and decided that Jess and I would be a good partner in that venture with them. And so they were good with it, but then, the way the trust and things are written, everybody's got a stake in this, and so then we had to pass that communication on to everybody for approval. And so, you got a lot of personalities, and the further you get away from the farm, everybody's got their own needs that they put first, which is, no different than my family. And fortunately, in this scenario, everybody was okay with that and happy to do so.
So what does your communication plan look like with them now, as far as some farmers we hear maybe they do an annual report, or maybe they just check in as necessary? What does that look like for the relationship that you have with your family?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And we approach the family very similar to how we've approached non-family land partners, and that when it comes to negotiating the lease and the financial aspect of the farm, it's a business transaction, okay? And so we try to put the emotion and the tie to the land on the sideline to a certain extent, and we have a discussion about the productivity of the farm and where the markets are today. It's really this is what it costs me to grow the crop. This is what the competitive market is in the area for land rent, as well as what the grain prices are, and this is what I foresee the risk being. And then from there we have a discussion, and it's never been a real big challenge for all the parties to come to a mutual agreement.
And then, as you mentioned, you also have investors that you rent from and work with. Is the relationship very similar, because you just mentioned you try and keep it very, business minded, or do you treat the parties a little bit differently?
Yeah, it's a very similar conversation for all the farms. The mechanics of it are we put the same reports together for everybody, and we apply the same principles of how we farm to everybody. Okay, so because of that, then the discussion is very similar with everybody. Now, some folks are more interested in land improvements than other folks, and so maybe that's reflected in the rental terms if we are willing to cost share some improvement, so then that starts to vary, and investors look at that different than family members, who look at that different than neighbor landowners and things, and so we just try to find that common ground with each party, and oftentimes that will take us in a little different direction each time.
So how did you get lined up with the investor landlord part of your farm?
Well, we don't work with, for say, one specific investor that rents all of his ground to us. We don't have that relationship that some people have. But the folks that we work with, our investment groups, are through a farm management company. And that all started with planting a few beans for a farm manager. He had an operator that was doing a great job that needed help on a farm planting some beans. And he needed the help every year. And so that was how we started. It was a big enough piece that it was worth our time and effort, and a small enough piece that we could absorb that without major changes to our operation. And so then the relationship's just grown from there.
And especially for young farmers, your advice was to be involved in your community, to be seen, and also to start somewhere. Can you expand on that? Why is it so important to be with your local Rotary Club or 4-H as a 4-H leader?
Sure. Well, first off, it needs to be something you're passionate about and you're committed to. And to do it just to grow your farm size or create an opportunity there would not be what I would suggest. My message there is the more involved you are in the community, the more visual you become, okay? And so then you're in front of more people. It's purely a scale thing. And pick something you're passionate about that you can find value for other reasons, because the return to growing your farm is going to be slow and hard to see and may or may not happen. So if you're doing it for the right reasons, this is a really nice benefit. But, get out in the community, get yourself passionate, whatever you're passionate about, engage in it. That helps the community. It makes the community stronger. And it's been my experience that folks tend to drift towards, people that are investing in more than just themselves.
Sure, I can definitely see where that would not only just benefit the community, but amp up that trustworthy level of someone would see you as someone that could take over what they're doing on their farm, or someone dependable to rent to because there's been this outside interaction.
You said the word trust there, and that's really what it's about, right? So it's trust and communication. Whether it's a pasture or a row crop acre or farmland, they're very valuable assets. They have a high worth, and they want to do business with people they trust and they like, and so we're all personalities, we're all individual people out here, and there's plenty of variety of folks to work with. And so if you engage in something you're passionate about in the community, likely there's other people that are going to have similar passions as you in the same group, and who knows what that leads to, and so, but then they can start to develop an understanding of what you're morals are and what your goals are and how you live, and that's how that trust develops. And that's the hardest part, is getting that first, right? And trust, it's an earned thing, and so that just takes time.
And one thing you also talked about was a sensitive topic of someone who is going through some financial struggle. So obviously, we want to be very careful in those situations because, as you know, people are very proud to farm. That's a loss of identity sometimes when they are unable to do that. But you had advice for a different way to come at it.
Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons farms change hands, is people run out of money or their business model, doesn't work out for them. And so offer a solution to that person, help them out. Maybe you can help them correct their ship a little bit, if you will, before it's completely sank. And so extend that offer. If you're looking to grow your farm, you have some room to take on some acres, and maybe you can partner up or sublease or something, a portion of land for somebody that's having a hard time for a short period of time. It's a fair thing to offer if that's what they're looking for, and so you just have to be respectful about how you offer it, and make sure that the times we've done it, we've been really clear that this isn't our goal to take a farm away from you. It's to help you as a neighbor, and right now we have the time and ability to help you to do that work. And so it's like any really good business transaction. If you start with the ending in mind and everybody is open and clear about that, then it has an opportunity to work. You certainly wouldn't want to enter it underhanded or something, trying to take advantage of a situation.
Absolutely. It would definitely need to come from a place of being genuine and actually wanting to help that person. So once you have that initial trust built up with your landlord, how can you maintain that and build upon that?
Yeah, it's constant communication. Whenever I get jammed up on something in a landlord relationship, or something isn't just quite the way we want it to be, I can always trace it back to communication. There was a misunderstanding. Somebody thought something different than what I was thinking. I mean, that's really what trust is there's probably a math ratio between the length of time and the amount of communication that equals some sort of level of trust, right? And so as long as what you're communicating is really what you're doing, and the longer you do that, the more trust there is. The thing that can get you in trouble is getting complacent on it. Over communicate. I get tired of communicating, and I don't communicate things I should sometimes because I feel like I'm over communicating, and then shortly thereafter something will show up that I wish I would have communicated more. So to a certain extent, I don't know that you can really worry about over communicating when it comes to a landlord relationship.
Yeah, you had said something that I had to chuckle at, and it was, don't let your landlord find out something about his or her farm at Hardee's.
Yeah, you know, things are going to happen in your farming operation that the neighborhood's going to have a chuckle over. That's just how it is, and if you're out doing something, sometimes bad things are going to happen, right? And so in that scenario, if it's not on your own piece of land, it's usually a good idea to give the guy a heads up or the gal a heads up that owns that piece of land that we ran into this challenge. This is how we're addressing it, and wanted you to hear it from us. Certainly saves some awkward phone calls after the fact.
You said something that I found surprising, and that was, when necessary, you should raise your own rates.
Well, I think you should have the discussion with the landowners at the terms of the lease. So if whatever your lease terms are, when it's time to renew those, it's certainly a valid discussion to assess the market where it's at. And if you want the land lease to follow the values down, then you would have to assume that it's fair to follow the land values up. And so it's been my experience that when I offer that, it helps me a lot when I need it to go the other way versus when I'm asked to pay more. And you know, the number that you need to land on is certainly negotiable and specific to each person's relationship. But if grain markets are rallying and land values as a whole are going up, that's because we're making some money on the farm, and not that we have to give the farm away, but the person that owns that farm certainly should have the opportunity to benefit from that if you're truly believing in a relationship built on trust and respect for each other, So you talk about building trust, right? There's I'm willing to pay you more because that's what the market is today.
And when it comes to rental payments, we know ISU puts out their cash rent survey every year, and you had talked about making your own, cost of production sheet. And, well, first of all, I found it interesting that I was in I think it was Farm Credit Services, and they were doing something about knowing your cost of production, and it was a very startling percentage of people that they surveyed who did not. I want to say over half. That's kind of crazy to me, I guess. That's something that we continually update throughout the year. But what other types of resources are there to arrive at that fair price? Is there anything that you use?
Every neighborhood has a market, if you will, and oftentimes that's the price that somebody paid and talked about it at the coffee shop or something, right? And so that sets the bar. And unfortunately, that's how it is. The number you need to land on for the specific farm you're in comes back to how your operations build and knowing your cost of production. And so I do my best to keep an updated cost of production on each farm, and down to the bushel. And so then that allows me to market the grain and see what my revenue potential is. And whenever the time to discuss that rent is with the landlord, whenever that is in your lease or your relationship, your preferred time to discuss it, now you've got somewhere to start from. You can discuss, this is my cost, this is what the perceived land value is right now, this is where the markets are, so then you can start to measure your risk a little bit. And then if you start a discussion about the farm itself and some of the improvements it may or may not need, and then it's been my experience that something will surface pretty quickly in the discussion that drives you in a direction, whether that's the dollar value or the quality of the farm. There'll be something that drives the conversation to get you to where you need to be with your partner.
So one thing that you had talked about with especially landlords who are maybe family members or, the neighbor down the road who's a retired farmer, is that connection to the land and communicating your expectations between one another.
Yeah, we all have different levels of success at communicating what we're trying to say. And so asking questions, knowing that expectation, if that's somebody that's been farming the farm for a long time themselves, they have a perception or a feeling on how they want that to go. And likely if they're talking to you and you're their pick, there's a reason they picked you. They probably like how you're doing things. And so just understanding what both parties' goals are has been my experience to be the most successful when you're taking, because you're taking care of somebody else's property. You're hoping financially to turn a profit, but at the same time you're using somebody else's property. And so just asking the questions.
Sure, because you had said, sometimes finances is the goal. Well, it's certainly always the goal, but then also with being conservation minded. And you had said that on your own farms, you have a specific conservation or environmental plan for each. Is that something that you communicate regularly about? Was that something they asked for, or just something you decided to do?
Oh, I had advice from a mentor at some point that that's something you should include in your elevator pitch, so to speak, that you should know what your environmental plan is. And so we took that to heart a little bit, and then we assessed it on our farms that we had. And I thought, we're already doing this. We're just not communicating it, because each farm we treat specific to its needs and what it'll let you do, so to speak. And so finances drive a lot of the conversation. It's, a lot of times comes down to dollars, but for some people, it's very important to them how the land's cared for and no-till versus minimum till versus deep till. We all have our opinion and our feeling about what's best in that situation. And if we're a financially minded guy versus a environmentally minded person, we might have different opinions on that. And so what we try to do on our farm is just identify what's best for the farm in the way that we operate our farm, and then approach that to the partner or the landowner and say, this is how we would approach this farm, or this is how we would like to approach this farm, and find out if that's in their comfort zone.
As a young farmer, what would your advice be going into your first rental agreement? Uh-oh, you chuckled.
Oh, there's just, that's a lot of things. The young man that was talking in here about 4 years into it and no farming background, I thought, holy cow, I wanted to go give the guy a high five. Your elevator speech is such a critical thing to have, and it's not so much to have the speech to grow the farm or whatever. It's more about the value in knowing who you are and where you're at in your operation, and paying attention to the fact that that changes as your life moves on, and so as long as you're continually evaluating that and you know who you are and where your farm is, so many of these things, the opportunities take care of themselves. Just communicate. If you've got an opportunity, if you've got somebody that has picked you out and is willing to help you with that and wants you to farm their farm, then they want you to be successful. Okay, that's why they picked you. They don't want to see you fail at it. And so use that person as a mentor, as a leadership tool, if you will, so to speak. Lean on them. And that's the person that's been farming the farm knows it as good as anybody. And if they own that farm, they know how they want things done and what they want to see. And so understand where you're at today, know what your financial situation is, what your operating situation is as far as equipment. And then, if you have an open discussion with that partner about what their goals are, I think it'll take care of itself to a certain extent.
Whether you're just getting started or you've been farming for years, that's some pretty solid advice for managing your tenant-landowner relationships. Thanks for joining us, Noah. Next up, let's talk livestock with Brian Waddingham of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. Spokesman reporter Corey Munson caught up with Brian to pick his brain on the benefits that trees offer livestock farmers, the aquaculture wave that's hitting Iowa, and even more.
Today we're joined by Brian Waddingham, Executive Director of the Coalition to Support Iowa Farmers. As we watch the season change and we're getting ready for spring to start here, we want to touch base with you about the Green Farmstead Partner Program that is offered through CSIF. Opportunity for Iowa livestock producers to add some greenery to their operation.
So the Green Farmstead Partner Program was started back in 2009 as a way to assist livestock farmers with planting windbreaks around their livestock barns and open feedlots. Since 2009, we have added 30 nursery professionals to that network that go out, visit with livestock farmers, get a better understanding of what their needs are, what their goals of the windbreak are, what their budget is, and then put together a plan for them to get windbreaks established. In some cases, we work with farmers to refurbish older windbreaks, or just in some cases completely tear out and start all over if there's insect damage or other damage, especially from the derecho most recently, that have had a negative impact on those windbreaks.
Certainly we can all appreciate the aesthetic value of having trees around your property. Is there any actual benefit financially or environmentally to having trees on your property?
Oh, absolutely. We see a lot of tangible benefits from windbreaks. One of the big ones is snow deposition control. So putting windbreaks in the right location can save you a lot of time from having to climb up on top of confinement barn roofs to remove snow. You don't have to scoop around tunnel fans or pit fans, scoop out feed bunks, and the list goes on. Also, we've seen a reduction in heating costs. Properly planted windbreaks can greatly greatly reduce what your LP bill might be in the wintertime. And, just things like that, you're not going to pay back a windbreak in year 1 or year 2, but over the course of the lifetime of that windbreak, it will pay for itself.
If a farmer in Iowa is interested in this program, can you tell us how they find out more and how they sign up?
So if you are a livestock farmer interested in planting a windbreak, I would suggest that you give us a call at 800-932-2436, and we'll come out to your farm, we'll visit with you, and based on what your goals are, we will refer you to one of our 30 nursery professionals that are trained to plant windbreaks and trees on livestock farms, and have them come out and draw you up a plan, which the coalition will pay for, that initial consultation and design of the plan. And then after that, it's up to you and the nursery professional to decide who's planting the trees, and you can have that nursery professional do mulching. You can do a service contract where they'll come back and do some pruning every year. Also, some will install irrigation. So this can be a very turnkey event, and a properly placed windbreak just has so many benefits today.
Especially from a neighbor relations standpoint, which is, I know, something that the coalition is very focused on, that can also help with those relationships.
Yeah, we like to call trees the original good neighbor enhancer. We've seen so many neighbor relation issues turn around due to planting of windbreaks or some nice ornamental trees out in front of the farmstead or the livestock barn. So anytime you can plant trees to help improve aesthetics around your livestock farm, maybe provide some visual screening, that certainly goes a long way. And through research at Iowa State University, we know that trees can reduce odor about 20% from a farm. So again, lots of benefits with trees.
The Green Farmstead Partner Program is something that you offer, but you also do a lot of work with Iowa farmers looking to add animal agriculture to their operation or looking to expand their operations. So what kind of calls have you been getting in the last few months? What are folks interested in right now?
So the last few months, we've seen calls from all livestock farmers. Our number one call for assistance today is with cattle, whether it's putting up calving barns, finishing barns, or maybe just wanting to make sure that their open feedlot was in compliance with the environmental rules and regulations. But we are getting calls from farmers interested in putting up new hog barns, broiler barns, egg laying facilities, turkey barns, as well as maybe even adding a new freestall barn or parlor onto the dairy. So we've seen a lot of optimism here recently in the livestock and poultry sectors, which I think is really good moving forward for the state of Iowa, because we know that livestock has such a positive impact on those local communities.
I know recently you hosted an entire conference on the possibility of adding aquaculture to farms here in Iowa. Is that a real viable business model for Iowans? And can you tell us a little bit about that type of farming?
So we hosted our aquaculture conference at the end of January and had just a little over 100 people attend that to find out more about raising fish and shrimp. Today, I think it is a viable alternative for folks interested in raising a different kind of livestock on the farm. And I think as time goes on, it's going to be even a better opportunity as we work to get more in-state processing, maybe an in-state feed production plant going. I think there's opportunities that will definitely present themselves in the coming years, but now's a really good time to start doing the research, finding out if you have a good location for a building, and just kind of going over the rules and regulations and what you can expect for when this does become a little more mainstream here in the state of Iowa.
Something else folks can expect to see when they give you a call is possibly contact with your latest staff member, Cody Havens. He's your new field specialist, and he'll be going out to farms and interfacing with those farmers on these projects.
Yeah, we added Cody Havens to our staff at the end of November, and he has hit the ground running. And he's been out on farms visiting with cattle, hog, aquaculture, dairies, so he knows the rules and the regulations and is a great resource for anyone looking to get some questions answered. And again, here at the Coalition, all of our farm visits are at no charge and completely confidential due to the support of Iowa's farm and commodity groups.
And one more time before we go, just remind folks how they can get a hold of you.
So if you are a young and beginning farmer looking to put up your first livestock barn, or an existing farmer looking to grow, or just has questions about the farm, please give us a call, 800-932-2436, or visit us online at supportfarmers.com.
From cattle to hogs to fish, no one's got a better handle on the latest in livestock than Brian and the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. If you'd like to learn more about the Green Farmstead Partner Program that Brian mentioned, or the variety of other services offered by the Coalition, remember to head out to supportfarmers.com or call 800-932-2436. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We're excited to see everyone who's coming out to Iowa Farm Bureau's Acres of Opportunity Conference in Cedar Rapids this weekend. And for everyone else, we'll look forward to having you join us for our next podcast episode on March 21st. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to The Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.